Good afternoon, everyone. It's Pablo Zuanic, cannabis analyst at Zuanic and Associates. I want to welcome Eric Offenberger, CEO of Vext Science, and Trent Woloveck, Chief Strategy Director at Jushi Holdings. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Morning, Pablo. Thanks for having us.
The purpose here of our call, we are very focused on the fundamentals of the industry. We get what's happening at the federal level. We understand what's happening with stocks. But this is still a very vibrant industry. You know, we're at $33 billion, 500,000 jobs nationally. You're talking probably about $8 billion in taxes when you count excise and income taxes. So obviously a very vibrant industry, and we're trying to focus on the fundamentals. And the purpose of this call is to focus precisely on Ohio, which was supposed to be one of the good news in the last 6 months, a state that had flipped from medical to rec. And we'll try to explore that, and in particular discuss the upside that Ohio can represent for Vext and Jushi. But just start with some introductions. So Eric, just tell the audience here about your company, please, and remind us of your current footprint. Thanks.
Thank you. Vext operates in Arizona and Ohio primarily. We have 2 operating dispensaries in Arizona. We have a cultivation manufacturing in Arizona, and as anybody that's familiar with Arizona, you know, it's been a more challenging and tougher market lately. We continue to perform better than the state average, and we want to continue to do that. So that's kind of our focus on Arizona. Ohio is where we've really been focused in putting capital the last few years. We recognized it early on, and we currently operate a tier 1 cultivation and a manufacturing located in Jackson. Excuse me. We have 2 stores that we consolidate right now, and we are awaiting state approval on 2 additional stores that are operating that we're hoping to be able to consolidate sometime in the first quarter of 2025. We also should maximize with the 8 licenses under the 10B program, and we're actively in build out on some of those. As we announced today, we just relocated our store in Jackson. That's pretty much the Vext footprint right now.
That's good. And of course, we'll expand on all of that. But Trent, introductory remarks from you.
Yeah, thanks, Pablo. Jushi, publicly traded, multi-state operator. Our footprint in Ohio currently is a level 2 grow, a processor, and 1 operational store. 2 other operational stores we have under MSAs, which we're patiently waiting for the state to do a transfer of ownership on those 2. We have our 10B license that we were granted with our tier 2 license in the process of being built out, and then also building out the other 2 10B locations from those retail stores that we have under contract. So that'll bring us to a total of 6. We are under a non-binding LOI for a 7th, and out in the market for an 8th location. So like Eric, we'll be getting to our max footprint. We've also increased our canopy size since adult use about 2.4x. Now, level 2 is not the same, unfortunately, as a level 1 from a canopy perspective. But we've also been able to buy bulk biomass to be able to fill the needs of finished goods for us as well. Other states for us, the big 2 are Virginia and Pennsylvania, where we have 18 stores in Pennsylvania, 125,000 square foot GP. Virginia, 6 stores operational, 100,000 square foot GP. We're also in Illinois with 5 stores, Massachusetts, Nevada, and California.
Thank you. And just for the audience, you know, in terms of the research reports that we published, we made the argument that in the case of Vext Science, they are one of the stocks with the most upside in terms of EBITDA to overcome valuation from Ohio having flipped rec. And in the case of Jushi Holdings, we have highlighted them as having one of the stocks with the most EBITDA upside and EBITDA toward valuation upside from states like Pennsylvania and Virginia going rec. So it's not a coincidence that the speakers are here on this call. Look, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit and discuss the dynamics in the market right now, and then we'll go back and expand on the licensing, the regulatory changes, and your operations there. Glass half full, glass half empty, Eric. The market, according to the latest data through 10th of February for Ohio, shows that the market has almost doubled since non-medical sales began on August 6th. So we should be positive about that. But I think expectations were for more, right? So your big picture macro view of the market, how is it developing? Is it growing ahead of expectations, below, and why?
Well, from our perspective, it didn't perform as well as we thought it would. Obviously, we thought it would be a little bit more robust when it came on. It's been a little slow. Some market data suggests that 30 to 40% of the population in Ohio still doesn't realize that it's an adult use or a rec market. So while the department's been really great to work with, getting the rules and being able to advertise and let people know you're there has been a little bit slower. That said, I think there was also a little bit of expectation of pricing that people had seen in other markets when they went to a recreational market, and that didn't transpire quite the same way in Ohio. There was maybe a little bit more capacity than people realized on the cultivation on the flower side and the adjustment there. We're still real happy with Ohio. We think it's still going to be a great market. It's just like you said, Pablo, it's a little bit slower starting than we had anticipated, but it's gaining momentum. And with the structure of the people at the department, they seem to be very attentive to working with it. Now, what happens with the legislature as that comes through, we'll see how that goes.
Right. I definitely want to expand on that, but Trent, your view also, macro view of the state of the market right now in Ohio.
Yeah, look, we as the industry as a whole continue to battle the illicit market, the gray market that is Delta 9 THC.
Right.
And we also battle the state up north to Ohio as somebody born and raised and lived 27 years of my life in Ohio. Can't say the state's names, but it's a very large market up north with competitive pricing. And so the days of the Illinois flip and that expectation where you see a 3 to 4x or 5x from people coming into a program, as well as a 3 to 5x on pricing is gone because that doesn't exist anymore because we have a lot more competition and many more states that have flipped to adult use and or have medical cannabis programs. So, we were rather, cautious about, where we thought that market was going to flip to. That's why we delayed CapEx spend for our cultivation facility. We didn't jump out ahead of the 10B licenses, buying locations. We patiently waited to buy pieces of paper. And I feel like that's, tended to be correct. So, we've built into the momentum that we've seen happen over the last, 6 months. Pricing's come down, supply has gone up. And so we feel very comfortable about where we're at, locations that we've been able to garner. We were lucky in that we sit on, the east side of Cincinnati, right on the highway that circles the city. And we're the first store across the Kentucky border on that side of the city. So, we probably got a little bit more of a lift than some people. And so we continue to see that, and we're, extremely excited about, our store in Oxford, our other store locations that we're going to be opening across the state.
Right. So again, I definitely want to expand on the operational side of things, but staying on the regulatory side, Eric, so what has to change or happen for, I guess, the market to accelerate, right? Pre-rolls are still not allowed. Are we going to have finally reg rules? Do we know what those rules will be? Do we have a clear timeline for that, or there's still some uncertainty in that regard? Because even sales, I think, are called non-medical, right? They are not called recreational. So
Right.
expand on that, please.
Yeah, you see different bits and pieces and stuff like that. We really don't react to it at this point in time, Pablo. I mean, obviously, we're like Trent, that we have other operations. So once we get pre-rolls there, we'll have the equipment available for us and be able to enter that space. So we keep working on that and watching. I do think Trent hit some nails on the head, that we'd been through the switch to adult use in Arizona. And yeah, why they call it, non-medical sales and stuff along those lines. You're working that way and working through it. It's just really a supply balance. So what I think is going to be the biggest change really in Ohio is once we can try to make the rest of the population aware of where people are at and where the stores are located, and they start to come in to see them, that I think that'll be the biggest activity. And I do think the pricing's been adjusted for the state up north that has to be remain nameless. They've only won 4 years in a row, so hopefully we get over that.
How many national titles?
Yeah, exactly, Trent. That's the next one we always go to. But the point being is people had a choice. And I think that's really what you're seeing, Pablo, is these markets are more developed and stuff along those lines. People weren't doing without the product. So at a certain point in time, you had to find that equilibrium of price where time versus driving and going somewhere else to get your product and stuff like that became more imbalanced. And I think Ohio's at that point now, and it's just upward from here. So I think that's the nice thing about Ohio. And we also we don't overbuild, so we're not farmers.
So Trent, but I mean on the same subject. So people keep talking to me about the new reg rules. I mean, is there such a thing really? And do we know what they are going to be? Do we know when they're going to be implemented? I mean, there's proposals for potency limits and things like that. What do we know exactly of what's going on, or there's still some uncertainty in that sense?
Yeah. There's regs or proposed regs that the regulator has put forward. Unfortunately, I think those regs are getting caught up on the political side with the governor's office, with the legislator. They are proposing that there's a lot of restrictions that are coming in to the industry, to regulated operators. On the non-medical side, on the medical side, raise taxes, potency limits, pretty much everything that their constituents voted on to be allowed to have a couple Novembers ago. And now they're trying to go against their constituents. That seems wrong. That seems super interesting. Last time I checked, they work for their constituents, not the other way around. And also, every dollar that they yank out of the legal market is another dollar they put back into the Mexican cartel's pockets. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of seems like common sense to not do that. But unfortunately, the industry continues to deal with a select few folks that want to be prohibitionists, that want to turn a blind eye to the unregulated, untested, untaxed Delta-9, THC, hemp folks that also operate in that market. No regulation, no legislation against that. So I'm a little confused how they can go about doing this when it's very clear how the state voted and what the constituents want within Ohio to the tune of 58%.
So, and Eric, we want to stay on that same subject here, but I could maybe add, so all the points are well taken, of course, and on point. And on the flip side, right, if I want to sound more positive, I could say that this is a market where there's a finite number of licenses, right? No, there's not a lot of new, say, social equity licenses being issued. Incumbents are grandfathered into a program, and with a 10B program, we'll be able to add more stores. So in that sense, that's a good thing about the program right now. Is that true? And is it true it's going to remain somewhat finite in terms of licenses issued, not counting the 10Bs that are, for the incumbents? Do you agree with that, Eric, or not?
No, I agree with you. I think, Pablo, I think really what you're thinking about is that it's no longer the specialty of cannabis. It's a regular industry, and you got to run it like a regular, well-run business. And that's what you're seeing in Ohio with the store counts and stuff along those lines. That's why we're still pretty optimistic. I think Trent's right on the regulation. I think you drive people back to the underground, but you'll also drive them into auxiliary states, and you'll start to see what happened in Arizona if they continue down this path where they take in less revenue year over year and less tax dollars. So I think that's really where the states have to get this idea that there are alternatives for their population, and if they overtax one side or the other, they're just going to push revenue somewhere else. And I think you're seeing that from Shapiro in Pennsylvania recognize that, and they're really talking about it. And I think Ohio will eventually get there. The nice thing is like you said, though, Pablo, is Ohio with the store counts, and if you're running a good business, it's got everything you want. It's got a good population. It's in the Rust Belt, the Midwest, the breadbasket, things I'm more comfortable with that work well. They're steady customer base and everything. And it's got a growing population base in Ohio. It's still growing in population. It's not losing population like you see California or New York losing population. We don't see that in Ohio. That's one of the things we like about Arizona too, is you don't see that in Arizona. You see population growth. So limited license markets, population growth, not a dilapidation. Those are all good things because you're going to deal with the competition in the marketplace no matter where you're at, right? So if you run the good balance sheet, low cost and everything, you'll be fine. And that's kind of our approach to it.
So look, I just want to stay there, but triangulate back to your own expansion plans. So if you have a license, one cultivation license, right, and you have 5 stores, you'll be able, from the 10B program, you'll be able to add 3 more. If you have cultivation 2, you have 1 store and you can add 1 more. But first of all, is that true, what I said? And do we know when you can start adding those stores? Or are we still waiting for that? And separate from that, regardless of the type of license you have, nothing stops you from buying other licenses if you're retail licenses, if you're below the cap, right? So Trent, maybe can you try to unpack that a little bit for the audience? But again, it's like within the system and within the very strict licensing system they have, you have room to expand, right? So maybe walk us through your plans and confirm what I said in terms of 1, having a certain number of retail stores and 2, having a certain 1 store.
Yeah. So level 1 grows received 3 10B retail licenses with that license. That's what they were granted, no matter if they were vertical or not vertical. If you were level 2, you got 1 additional store. You have those. We went through a process to identify locations and then went into a lottery to get those locations awarded. You could have got knocked out based on a whole litany of different things. So all that has been done, dusted, and decided. I think they did 2 more rounds after they did the initial round. So if you have a 10B, probably 80 to 85, 90% of those people know the location where their stores can be at. You can transact on those stores, whether you're a seller or a buyer. Now, the state's been much slower than they have told businesses on approving those transactions. It's, again, confusing why this approved for all those things, needs to be delayed, do background checks. You talk about excess waste within the government. This is quintessential paper pushing. And so we're still waiting for, our M&A stores that we've closed on to actually close on them because we haven't gotten approval yet. So waiting on that. We continue to push on building out 10B locations. That just takes time. You have to go through all the permitting at the local approvals and then get the regulator to come out and inspect. So, all that's happening. You're seeing people open stores across the state, new stores across the state, pretty much on a weekly basis now. Jushi's going to be no different. I'm sure Vex is going to be no different. A lot of folks that have 10B locations will do that. And then from there, I think the state is going to decide, where and how they roll out any additional licenses. So, Eric's point of, it's not oversaturated. If you can't run a 5 to 7 to $10 million store profitably, you're in trouble, and you shouldn't be in the industry anyway. So all that'll get weeded out, and you'll see the market continue to grow and normalize.
Right. So Eric, along the same lines, I mean, you as a cultivation one, you can have up to 5 stores, right? You can add 3 more 10B. After that, can you acquire more, or that's it? You're capped at 8 in total.
As far as right now within the regulation, you're capped at 8. So, will they change? Probably, but for right now, we're fixated on getting our 8 up and going. We have, as we said, we're like Trent, we're waiting for state approval to close our M&A, and we have 2 stores, and we've announced one of the stores that's under construction right now that should be finished soon. We hope to have all 8 by the end of 2025. We might bump into 2026 a little bit based upon permitting and stuff along those lines, but that's still our expectation within the state. And we operate the business similar to what we've always done on a distribution model, in that we like to be a couple hours within a couple hour radius of the cultivation facility and the manufacturing facility. So we like to try to have a tight footprint and watch our distribution channels and match up our processing and manufacturing so that we don't have to be a big wholesaler. So, we've adopted the same strategy in Ohio, which we think it's the right way to go, and keep that balance sheet tight, so we recognize that the larger tier ones out there, Pablo, are going to have an advantage of scale. If we stay small with a good balance sheet and good cash generation, we think that makes Vext have more opportunities as you go forward.
So just on that point, my impression was that in Ohio, there were a lot of independent private operators owning stores. Now, with those 10B that they own, I would assume they want to be flipped, right? So what's the M&A or the market right now for stores? Is it easier to buy? Have prices come down? Is there more supply? Any thoughts on that, Trent?
It's a buyer's market for sure. There's, even certain public companies that have excess licenses in some cases, or, need some cash. Ohio's ripe, from that perspective. Like you said, there's, smaller operators, level 2 grows, for example. They may not want to open a store. They just want to stay on the product side. Same with certain level 1s too. And then the independent retailers, they may be happy with just one store or don't have the CapEx to build out a second store. So, you're seeing it come in a little bit from a pricing perspective. We continue to kind of wait and see what we want to do with our 8th and final location because we've seen, pricing come to us.
Right. And along the same lines, Eric, I mean, as more stores open, I suppose that supplies maybe are not keeping up and prices are improving, or is it the other way around? I'm just trying to understand how the supply side of things, the production side, is keeping up with the pace of store openings now.
Well, I think the capacity and the production always finds its way to that. So that's why we think, wholesale it's a fleeting game, So in the initial time, you might be okay, but long term, it doesn't really work out. And you can use it, multiple states to see how that's occurred. So we think that's the same thing in Ohio. We think it's a limited window. So to spend your CapEx like you're going to be in a wholesale business in a wholesale market, we don't see that as smart. And I see Trent shaking his head. So obviously they agree with our philosophy on that too. And we could be wrong, but that's what we've seen in other states. So we've done it that way. So what I would say is, Pablo, as these stores add, the state's done a pretty good job, and some of the counties have tried to limit the number of stores. So when you look at the overall size of a market, and we all do a per store thing or per square footage, typical retail stuff, right? I think you'll see some shrink on that as you go. We've tried to balance, as we said, within the 2.5 window and focus more on the cost side of it. So we think that demand's going to be there and that market's going to be there. We don't see it as brands. We've never seen brands in this. We've seen it more like white label type of stuff, like you would see in grocery industry or other industries. We don't think it's a brand that necessarily is going to do it within the market complexity of the states and the state laws and not transporting. So we view it like, for lack of a better term, pick Kroger or something. They're seeing more white label sales going up in their stores and consumers more price competitive and stuff like that. So we think it's all about the cost and the distribution and the product availability. So, in the space, quality is become a standard. It seems like there's two differentials on tiers. You got a lower tier, 20 to 20, 20 to 25, 25 and above. There is no middle shelves really anymore. And that seems to be where it is. And consumers are extremely price sensitive as you read the economic news across these, country. We don't see that changing. That's why we like Ohio, where caps on stores and a growing population, not a decreasing population, so that we're not losing on a per store basis of revenue.
Right. I mean, maybe let me just expand there in terms of your store specifically. Obviously, location in a state like Ohio matters. If you're very close to Michigan, I suppose that's not so great. Close to Indiana border, close to the South, you're in good shape. Pennsylvania, we'll see what happens there. Just remind the audience of the location of your stores, Eric, and along those same lines, is there a lot of price difference if I have a store in Toledo versus a store down in Cincinnati, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take that one to start with, Trent, and I'm sure you got more insight too. But from our perspective, we think there's some of that. I think people have been kind of pricing like as their chain, not necessarily on their locations yet. I think it'll start to see some of that. We give flexibility to our store managers for manager specials and that, knowing what their market's going to do. So we're starting to gravitate towards that. We've always liked, we're in Columbus. We'll have a few stores down around the Cincinnati market when we get through with the 10Bs. We'll have the Jackson store, Athens, Portsmouth, so we'll be built out in that, that's, I-70 down type of a market. And we see the rural stores as good for loyalty and everything. Your top line's good, as long as you got competitive pricing and, you're there. When you get into the metro areas, again, consumers usually stay within a radius of where they shop. They don't usually drive that far as long as they're getting the same or similar product and pricing. So with the zoning and that seems to be good. So that's been ours. Now, when you get up towards the state with it shall remain nameless, when you get up there, yeah, those people are definitely going to be having a lot of price pressures and a lot of things. I don't know what's going to happen up around Cleveland when Pennsylvania starts to go adult use. You might not see as many people come across. The nice thing about Ohio is there's only one state that has adult use that borders up against them. Some of them had medical programs, do not have adult use. And, we're going to see Kentucky carry over like Trent's talking about earlier. You'll see that, and it'll take a while for that program to develop. So I think down there, you'll have an advantage. Close to Indiana, probably an advantage for a while because people will cross. That's just the way it'll be.
Yeah. I mean, Trent, the same question in your case. Have you disclosed what all your stores are going to be, or not yet? Is that public information?
Not yet. We've disclosed the 3 that are operational: Toledo, Oxford, and Cincinnati. More to come on the locations, moving forward as they open. And so, yeah, I think we sit in a unique position. We have a Cincinnati store and we have a Toledo store. We absolutely have to price different in those two markets. And then Oxford with, the greatest university in the United States in Miami University. It's a college town, it's a college campus. And so you have to price different there as well. We've found in Pennsylvania, for example, with 18 stores, some on the east side, some on the west side, some down in Philly, some up in Scranton. You have to really look at it, not quite as aggressive as California, where it's like individual by individual store, but you definitely have to look at it by region. And we do price based on pockets. No different in Ohio as well. I think we'll have, a very diverse footprint across the state because we have a processor license in Columbus and our grows up in Toledo. So we kind of, sit central with that Columbus processor that we, like to distribute out of. And so, you'll see us kind of, continue to expand where we think there's some cannabis deserts and or cities or jurisdictions that have surrounding areas that don't allow adult use cannabis sales. So that's kind of where we pick and choose retail locations.
Look, I mean, and for the audience, we take questions from the audience. They come by email. Some put it on the Zoom chat room. You can, or in Spaces, in Twitter also. I want to paraphrase a couple of questions here that we also have on pricing. Is like, in general, can you say, what's the average price for an 8 ounce of flower in Ohio versus the state north of Ohio? But I know that will vary by region. But if you can comment on that. But the other question that I'm getting is, if people get used to driving 2 hours to get, cheap cannabis in the state north, do they still keep that habit, or has that changed? I don't know if any one of you two want to pick that up. Maybe you, Trent, start with that.
Yeah, look, I'm from Columbus, Ohio. My parents still live in Columbus, Ohio. I know plenty of people still in Columbus, Ohio. They aren't driving anymore. Now there's a select few that, may drive up there to buy in bulk. But most people that are consuming regular consumers of cannabis aren't driving up that way anymore. And so yeah, that's kind of where we see the market going. We've seen probably like a 30 to 40% reduction in pricing in the marketplace since people took that first shot when we flipped. So that's always a net positive. I still think we have a little bit of ways to go, if you will. But we've always used the theory of you kind of got to get to $25 an eighth to be competitive. And if you can't do that, then you're not going to have the margins and flow through of EBITDA. It's a little bit different in Ohio because they sell like tenths and crazy different formats, but 2.8 grams is about $35, so it's still, in my mind, rather expensive. You can make a lot of money on that. And so I still think there's room to go. So yeah, it's just a continued dance between supply and demand. And I think, as you continue to see supply come online or operators, open additional stores, that price will continue to normalize in my mind.
Anything you want to add on that subject, Eric?
Well, I think we're seeing a little bit tighter pricing on the tenths in the Columbus market than what Trent might be seeing down in the Cincinnati. So it's a little bit tighter there, or a little bit more competitive. We're in the low 20s a lot of times for discount out the doors. But
Still a bit better.
I look, I hate that, I hate to be the the guy who says it, but it's a commodity, Pablo. It's really because it's a commodity product. There's not as much differential to it and stuff along those lines. And I think back to, when I peddled milk for Land O'Lakes, it's the same type of a thing, that it's the retail shelf space you want to control. So if you have the shelf space and you put a decent product out there and you give it a good price, you're doing very well and you can do well in that space. If you have the best product in the world and you don't have retail space, it's not going to work. So that's kind of what we've been focused on. Just not we don't fall in love with our inventory. We want to turn it over and sell it and give the consumer a good price and move forward. So we look at velocity a lot. We look at velocity through the store and days on the shelf and stuff along those lines. Again, very traditional, nothing special because it's cannabis.
Well said.
Yeah, moving on the discussion, just remind us of the state of your balance sheet and how you're going to expand your expansion plans in Ohio. Eric, I'll start with you on that. So just a quick reminder of the state of the balance sheet and how you fund the expansion in Ohio.
Well, we've always used, like traditional debt. We've always had optionality to buy our properties. So we used, traditional mortgages or other types of things or, leases, not sale leasebacks or any of that stuff that's longer term or higher debt. Most of our debt's sub 10 that we have. We have some vendor carryback and stuff along those lines. We have Ohio funded. We've spent a lot of time in that, and now it's all about cash generation and performance, and that's what we're focused on. So if you look at the industry, we've really focused on cash flow from operations, Pablo. So that if you look at, these were capital intensive things, and I think a lot of us, when we were building out on capital intensive stuff, the return on assets really isn't there yet from like a traditional business, but the cash flow is. So if you focus on the cash flow and do that, you'll start to see a balance as the market changes. And then you'll get like to a traditional return on invested capital type of a model because you get so much heavy depreciation in that up front on these things. So that's what we're seeing. And, that's why everybody focuses on EBITDA and all that stuff. But we're focused on the cash flow and then continuing to improve that balance sheet, paying down the debt. We've got good debt, as you know. And, we haven't made any stupid mistakes where we're paying for it with the debt. So we feel good about that. Nothing coming due either. So I'm not out there trying to refinance either. I feel sorry for some of the people that you see having to do that right now.
To be clear for the audience, when you say Ohio funded, you mean funded with the cash flow for operation there, or you want to fund your
cash flow, and we've made the investment. So in the prior year, so if you look at our 20, as you go through the first quarter, second quarter, the stuff we've released publicly, our cash flow from operations was suffering a little bit because we were funding that or using some of the equity raises we had and stuff along those lines. And now you switch, so the pendulum changes, right? So now we're on the other side of it. And we haven't overstepped our bounds so that we get to reap some of the reward of being on the other side. And that's refreshing for us. But we do a tight.
Yeah, understood. Look, and I know you have an aversion to that, but do you have are the regional banks in Ohio lending to the industry, or are one or two that because of non-medical have become more active in the space? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, I'll tell you from our perspective, my legal counsel that we brought on is based in Ohio, and he'd started some of the programs for some of the people on the debt, and that's how I met him. And and that's helped us a lot with the property. So it really depends, Pablo. As long as you have something to secure it back against that's not necessarily the license, and you have optionality, yeah, you can get financing. It's not as good as it used to be, but it's still doable. So to me, it's always about that real estate package, So when we've looked at it, we've always kind of taken an approach of it that says we wanted to have hard assets. We wanted to be able to generate cash flow and stuff along those lines, keep a smaller footprint and stay focused on that because we thought, do it like a private equity play or something like that, where you could always use your assets to refi when the market changes or the legislation changes so that we had optionality. And that's really what we've been focused on. And Ohio really helped us with that. And, I'd say we're about 9 to 9 to 12 months behind where we thought we'd be because of the way the market rolled out. And I'm sure Trent's company's experienced some of that too. You anticipated it to be higher and you'd get the 4 multiple and stuff. I think we're moving that way, but it's going to be a little bit more gradual and people had to get adjusted to their pricing and get their supply in balance.
Got it. And Trent, in the case of Jushi, how are you funding the expansion in Ohio and the M&A? With stock mostly, or how?
Yeah. Hey, Eric, by the way, if you're counsel, I have a $5 million free and clear asset in Ohio. Just,
We'll talk offline. I'll have him help you.
But no, seriously, like Eric, we don't have anything due until the end of 26, which is nice. We got that refinanced in Q3 of 24. So really, the first 3 quarters of 2024, a lot of our operational free cash flow, was going towards paying down debt. We did something like 30 plus and then, refinanced at 48.5 million bucks. So the fourth quarter, a lot of that operational free cash flow was going towards our M&A that we did in Ohio, as well as the CapEx spend that we did in cultivation and building out those additional 10B locations. So same thing as Eric, we're going to be doing that moving forward for Ohio. And so again, I think we're in a unique spot with Pennsylvania coming down the pipe for adult use, and Virginia. We'll see what happens with adult use. It's on the governor's desk again as of yesterday. But we are not starved for real good return on operational free cash flow. And the M&A market is extremely accretive if you can strike the right deals for people like us. So that's kind of how we view the Ohio world.
For sure. Look, I know we've covered a lot in Ohio. I'll ask a couple of questions outside the state now. So maybe for you, Trent, expand on PA and Virginia, right? Just more color if you can in terms of other states in your footprint that could go rec and what makes you confident. I mean, in the case of Virginia, we all expect the governor to veto those bills. So we have to wait for the election this November. What happens after that? If you can comment on that. In the case of PA, we've been here before, right? But it just things get jammed or stuck in the Republican Senate in PA. But just again, your thoughts on Virginia and PA. And we're all hoping for the best, of course.
Yep. So bill got out yesterday from the General Assembly. He's going to have to veto 2 bills in Virginia to the governor's desk. He's made his positions very clear when he vetoed the bill last year. I think a lot of that will be counterproductive and or countered with actual real science from the HHS work. So we'll see if he comes up with something else. But we'll see what happens. He's done in November. He cannot run for a second term under Virginia law. There's a very strong Democrat that they're coalescing around. She's a U.S. representative, Abigail Spanberger, who I think would be a good candidate for cannabis to again a $4 billion market. There's maybe 500 million bucks of medical sales, so you're talking about $3.5 billion going to cartels and illicit crime. So getting that cleaned up is a must. And she'll be there for next session. Along with there's a lot of unknown circumstances in Northern Virginia with the recall of a bunch of people and so on and so forth. So we'll see what happens in November for the governor's.
But before you go to PA, so best case scenario in Virginia, a Democrat gets elected governor, takes over January 26, bills on her table, February 26, adult sales July 26, or is that too bullish?
Look, the bill that's on the governor's desk right now is May of 26.
Okay. May of 26, the current one. Oh,
The
okay.
current one, which, is not, we'll see what happens, but theoretically, yes, a bill passed next session could be implemented by July 1st of 26.
Right. Okay.
July 1st of 26, October 1st of 26, or Jan 1 of 27. Those are kind of the three kickoff dates that I think would be realistic for passing legislation next year. Pennsylvania, you've seen a lot of noise around Pennsylvania. You heard the governor speak in his budget last year. He had, touched on it, but didn't really give any, color around what he thought the program should look like. He gave much more detail, much more thought about it instead of just saying, freaking Ohio has it. Why can't we do it? He laid out real numbers. And so I think, the conversation is being had at the high levels, as far as, the Republicans in the Senate. Look, they're trying to do the same thing with illicit, skilled games, aka slot machines. There's about 125,000 slot machines in the state right now that are not regulated, that are not taxed. They put forward a bill, leadership put forward a bill in the Senate that he wants to regulate those, license those, tax those, get it down to about 35,000 in the state. So if you take a step back and think about it, all they're doing is taking something that's untaxed, unregulated, who knows where that money's going, and regulating it.
Right.
It's no different with cannabis. I mean, it's just, again, common sense. You're taking dollars into the regulated market as one less dollar for the cartels that are going to continue to thrive with the current market. And so I think you even heard the governor in his budget address, tie those two things together. So I'm rather bullish. We've said you'll start to see movement in Q1. I think you'll see something, done around budget time, which would be in the first half of this year, maybe slides into July. So that's how we're thinking about PA too.
Okay, so reg sales potentially start in July 2025 in a best case scenario.
No. Sorry. Legislation to be passed by July of 25. Implementation, let's call it 90 to 100 days, 180 days thereafter.
Right. Got it. Thank you for that. It's good, great color. Look, just one question from the audience, brief answer. Are hemp derivatives a bigger problem in Ohio than in Pennsylvania? I'm sure they're a problem in both states, but any nuances there to highlight?
It's a problem in all 50 states
For
from
sure.
my perspective.
Yeah, but I'm saying it seems that some states have a bigger issue than others, or some states have cracked down against them more than others, or you don't see it that way. It's the same across the board.
I mean, there's I'm sorry, Eric, I'll let you jump in after this, but
You're fine.
there's a big difference between regulating against it and enforcing it. Ohio and Pennsylvania both don't have anything on the state level stuff, where Virginia does have stuff at the state level stuff, or regulations at the state level stuff, legislation at the state level. So I would put Ohio and Pennsylvania in the same bucket. Law enforcement can't do anything if they don't know how to treat it, quite frankly. And so you're just not seeing enforcement, unfortunately, in Virginia like they should be. And I would put Ohio and Pennsylvania in that same bucket. No enforcement because the cops can't do anything about it. It's embarrassing, quite frankly.
Eric, any thoughts on that, on hemp?
Yeah, I think similar thoughts. I mean, to me, it gets down to practicality. I think the states really have got like a disparity going on with what they're doing as far as regulation and tax base and stuff like that. And our only hope is it doesn't seem like the political class does a lot unless there's an economic interest. I think we'll see something at some point in time. In Ohio, I think they don't like the social stuff of the product being unregulated and in the stores and the age issues and all that. I think that's a concern, but I think the tax issue is what really will start to get them going and not having that control on the regulation. So I think you'll see some clarity there. Arizona's similar. There's no stopping it. I mean, you see it all over the place, and you see this. Everybody's playing with it. I mean, you've written about it in your coverage, of the larger companies or MSOs looking at how do they participate in that space and stay in the cannabis space too. So I think we're all trying to figure out where it goes and what it happens. I do think you're going to see something start to happen on it though in 25 going into 26, but that means we're going to have another 12 months of, not really good for that space.
Yeah, and I just want to be perfectly clear. There's a big difference between doing a drink and maybe some gummies versus selling THCA vapes
Flower.
and flower.
Yeah.
There's certain people that are, doing it one way, and there are a lot more people doing it the other way, which aren't people that are above board, getting tax products. They don't care about age gating. It's just money in, money out for them.
Right.
Yeah, and even some with gummies, right? They are like packaged for kids and with huge potency. So it's just as bad a problem with hemp gum.
Yeah, I think the media does a big disservice to lump people like Eric and I, businesses like Eric and I, and everybody in the regulated state space with somebody that produces a Dorito chip that has, God knows how much THCA, or Delta 9 THC. Like media doesn't delineate that, and it's
being so
embarrassing.
right? Yeah. No, for sure. Look, Eric, I mean, I know we're going to be running out of time here. Eric, someone is asking me a question, and maybe it's not fair, but I think it's interesting anyway. People hear a lot about the tier one MSOs, large companies. Vext, it's a much smaller company, but here you're pretty much competing neck and neck with the big folks in Ohio, right? So explain how you do that and how is that possible? And again, I know you addressed it, but maybe just rehash the point.
Yeah. I guess the way we approach the market is it's a staple, and we think it's all about cost control and price discipline. So the fact that you can, you have zoning in a certain number of stores and everything along those lines, and if you produce your own goods, you really can control it. And there's not a lot of economy of scale that way. What happens is when you're in a state like Ohio, if we can maximize the doors at 8 and we've got the supply matched up with the demand, you can compete. So what happens there is that's why we decided from a capital structure standpoint to try to stay in that small footprint range. And, Trent danced around it a little bit, but we're the same way. You hate to say that you're looking for how the industry is going to change, and you want to have your balance sheet and your cash position in a place to be able to take advantage. The last few years on the market, things weren't that accretive. So, why would you want to be a shareholder and put up some capital, or an investor and put up a capital on something that's going to have a negative cash flow return to you? I mean, I'd rather put my money in the bank and leave it. So I think you're seeing some of that happen in the industry, and some people's balance sheet might not support that, or they might have done it too early in the cycle, Pablo, and we didn't. So they don't have the room to be able to grow. And that's why we've thought that the cash flow and get the balance sheet right provides those opportunities, whether it's in Arizona, Ohio, existing states, or you look at something else, as long as it makes sense. And we spend 6 to 9 months in Ohio now getting to that position, and that's where we go. So.
And then look, another question also for you, Eric. I mean, we've seen a few companies from Arizona, like Story, Mint, yourselves, expand from Arizona into other states. I mean, is that a trend? What is it about Arizona? It was a tough market, but probably a lot of good lessons learned. Or is it just common across all states? People at the end of the day start in one state and move on to somewhere else. Or is there something?
Yeah, obviously Story, because of Jason. I mean, obviously Jason has done this once before, so he's got a playbook, right, for what he's going to do in that. The Mint gentlemen, I don't know them as well, but they really run a good operation and are good at retail and stuff along those lines. So, they're invested in the space, and I think they'll continue to look at where it makes sense opportunity-wise for what their model is. So I think that's it. And, again, Arizona's tough, but if you compete in a market like this, it's really tough because of the way it's evolved with an oversupply on cultivation. It really prepares you to be able to compete in a different market set, right? So you're used to watch your costs, watch your expenses, pay attention to what you're doing. That's why I said the branding, that's an expensive play, right? You got to put a lot of capital behind that. You've got the issue of you can't control the retail. That's why we think that it's a value proposition that's really going to drive the end of the day for at least, the next 3 to 5 years, from what we can look out at. But, that's an opinion.
Right. No, thank you. Look, I mean, I know we're almost out of time here. So the very last question, Trent, closing remarks, maybe remind, people why they should be buying Jushi shares. And I intentionally left questions about federal level reform and changes. I guess I intentionally left that out, but give us your view about what may or may not happen in 2025 and how do you run your business, with that uncertainty, but just your opinion in terms of what would happen. And again, closing remarks. Thanks, Trent. Again.
Yeah, easy story for Jushi. Business that's primed and ready to go with little to no capex left in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Virginia as those transition to adult use and or expand adult use in Ohio's sense. We are massively penalized for I think where our balance sheet used to be. That's been cleaned up over the last 2 quarters. And so I think, we continue to execute on, our strategy, which, similar to Eric, is retail first, back into upstream supply. Once we have that retail built out, we're continuing to execute on that. We're going to have, 7 stores open. The goal we set out at the end of last quarter, 7 stores open by mid this year, 7 more stores by, mid 26. So a lot of organic growth and M&A growth on the retail side for us. Pennsylvania goes, that's $40 million of additional EBITDA for the business. Same thing with Virginia when that goes, again, with little to no capex. And that's a very different profile as we walk into middle to end of 26 when we need to refi. So I'd say that on the Jushi side, as far as federal goes, it's pretty simple. Promises made, promises kept. Donald Trump on the trail before he was elected, truthed out S3 is going to happen and SAFER is going to happen. Promises made, promises kept. He's done that so far, and I think he's going to continue to do that. Cannabis is too much of a common sense thing not to get done. And the last thing I'll say, because I said it enough on the Dales report, but I'll say it again today. Every dollar for the legal market is one less dollar for the Mexican cartels, period.
Thank you. Eric, same question for you. Closing remarks, pitch your stock, and then your views on what may or may not happen at the federal level.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. When you started to introduce Vext, we have tremendous upside potential and stuff like that. You're in a investor, unknown and uncertainty, and it's been start and stop and that. So you'll have to have some impetus that makes people relook at the industry. And in the meantime, all we can focus on is doing the cash flow, keeping our expenses, taking care of the customer and doing all those things and have a good business. And if we do that, then as the market changes, our variables change, then, people will start to look at you and go, hey, you're going to execute and you're going to do it. Whether it's promises made, promises kept, as Trent said, where you saw me smile. But yeah, that's pretty much it. There's nothing sexy about Vext. There's nothing sexy about what we do. We just get up every morning, go to work, and just run a good business. And that's it. It's nothing special. as far as legislation-wise and stuff goes, I tend to agree with Trent. I mean, it's kind of common sense to me. Going, you saw some Congress Republican senator the other day propose something about trying to keep the 280E, even if you go from a Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, that the 280E stands there and everything like that. I don't see that happening or occurring. I think you'll see a rescheduling happen and you'll see some casual stuff. The fact that Trump pushes everything down towards the states, I think you'll see that on the cannabis side. And is it this year? Is it next year? I don't know. But the tide's turned, and I'm older, so I've been around a while. I remember when everything we did in cannabis was illegal. So I think you're going to start to see some of that, but I don't think you're going to full legalization. I think the states are going to have their rights, and the states will continue to control it. So, it's a good industry. It's a good place for people to invest in. There's a lot of good companies in the space, and it's like you said. How does Vext compete against the larger people? Well, we run a good business, and you're in a state that you've got some type of regulation that allows you to compete. So you're able to do that. And that's kind of what our model will be, and we'll just continue to move forward. We can't control the regulation. We just operate in it.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thanks to Trent Woloveck, Chief Strategy Officer at Jushi Holdings, Eric Offenberger, CEO at Vext Science, great insights, Ohio, national views also. Everyone, thank you for joining. The call stays on X, stays on YouTube. Reach out if you need any other information. But thanks again to our speakers. Everyone, have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pablo.
Thanks.